The road cut through the frost like a forgotten scar, white-rimmed and hushed, with only the wind whispering through the cottonwoods. Rhett Colton rode slow, reins loose in one gloved hand, the other resting idle against the saddle horn. His mare's breath fogged the morning air, every hoof-step muted by snow. He wasn't aiming to reach town early, just enough to beat the gossips to the general store and load up before anyone tried to ask how he was doing. Folks always asked with eyes that meant something else. It was a flicker of movement on the rise ahead that stopped him. Something didn't belong. Not a deer. Not a coyote. A figure. Walking. He squinted under his hat brim. A woman. No bonnet. No boots. Just a shawl flapping against the wind like a broken wing. She limped as though the snow hurt her bones. Or perhaps something older did. He nudged the mare forward and dismounted once he was close enough to see her face. What he saw made his jaw tighten. One side of her cheek was bruised, swollen high with the shape of fingers. Her lower lip split, dried blood threading toward her chin. She looked at him once, then down again, as if even eye contact was a sin. She tried to keep walking. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, not unkind. "You look like you're about to fall." She didn't answer, just kept walking, though slower now. He stepped into her path. "Where you headed?" Silence. "Nowhere's cold this time of year." She stopped. Her bare feet trembled in the snow, skin red raw. Still, she didn't look up. Her voice, when it came, was like worn lace, frayed and barely holding. "Ain't your concern." He nodded once, slow. "That's fair. But I got a wagon with wool blankets and hot coffee still warm in the flask." She didn't move. "Name's Rhett Colton. I own the Lazy Creek Ranch east of town." Nothing. He reached behind and unfastened his coat, holding it out like offering a truce. "Take it. I ain't freezing today, but you might." She hesitated. Then, without a word, took the coat and draped it over her shoulders. The sleeves hung past her hands. Rhett led the mare to the wagon hitched by the trees and helped her climb in, careful not to touch her unless she needed the arm. She winced once getting settled, one hand to her ribs. He didn't ask more. The ride to town was quiet. The wagon creaked, the horses plodded, and the snow flurried in lazy spirals. Rhett kept glancing her way. She tucked her face into the collar of his coat, eyes scanning every tree like she expected something to jump from behind it. She didn't speak, not even when they crossed into town. Etta Holloway. That name didn't pass her lips, but it was on every face they passed. A curtain twitched at Miss Bell's boarding house. Children stilled in the street, eyes wide. And there, behind the general store window, stood Della Rowe, mouth pressed into a line, eyes sparking with the glee of fresh scandal. Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop outside the sheriff's office. He stepped down, then offered her a hand again. She didn't take it, but she followed. Inside, Marshal Boone Carter looked up from his desk, startled to see them both. His mustache twitched. "Well, I'll be," he said slowly. "Etta May Holloway. Folks said you were still with Eli and Ruth, out at the old homestead." Rhett felt the woman stiffen beside him. "I found her walking toward the canyon." "Barefoot," Rhett said flatly. Boone stood, his chair creaking. He was an old man with good instincts, but his eyes had the cautious shine of someone already thinking about keeping peace, not making it. "Miss Etta," he said gently. "You all right to speak?" She shook her head. "She needs rest," Rhett said. "Food. Quiet." Boone scratched his chin. "Now, Rhett, you know I gotta ask. That families, well, they ain't fond of strangers interfering." "I'm not a stranger." Boone's gaze lingered on the bruises. "I can't hold her here without cause." "I'm not asking you to," Rhett said. "She's coming with me." Boone's brow rose. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Boone gave a small nod, though he looked like a man measuring the distance to trouble. "Word'll get back to Eli. You know that. Let it." Outside, the air had changed. He could feel it. Like every window in town was watching. They crossed the dusty street, Rhett walking slow, so she wouldn't have to limp fast. Inside the store, the bell above the door jingled. Della turned, fake surprise blooming on her face. "Well now." "Mornin', Rhett." And, "Oh dear, Miss Etta, is that you?" Etta flinched. Rhett spoke with the weight of gravel and grace. Need boots. Women's. Size 6, maybe 6.5. Della's eyes drifted down to Etta's bare feet, then up to the bruises, and for a moment, she looked genuinely troubled. But the moment passed. Well, she sniffed, I suppose we have some leftover from last winter. Might be tight. Most women don't walk out of their homes with nothing, unless they mean to cause stir. Rhett didn't answer. He just walked down the aisle to the back, where the boots sat. Etta stood, eyes on the floor. Hope you ain't planning to make a habit of rescuing strays, Rhett, Della murmured as he returned with the box. He didn't even glance at her. I reckon the Lord did. They left with the boots, a shawl, and some dried apples Rhett tossed in like an afterthought. He lifted Etta into the wagon again, still without touching her. The road out of town stretched ahead, white and quiet. I ain't worth this, Etta said finally, her voice barely a breath. Rhett kept his eyes on the reins. Ain't for you to say. She turned to look at him, then really looked. Something inside her cracked, but softly, like river ice loosening under morning light. I don't want to go back, she said. You won't. A long silence followed. She clutched the coat tighter. Why were you doing this, she asked. Rhett's voice was low. Because someone should have done it for my wife. Long time ago. The ranch gate creaked when they reached it. Snow drifted over the sign, Lazy Creek, carved in rough wood. 2 dogs barked from inside the barn, tails thumping. Etta looked up at the place. It was simple, timber and smoke, with the smell of hay and wood stove. A place built more for use than show. Where'll I sleep? Where you like. House has 2 rooms. No locks, no tricks. Just rest. He helped her down, finally touching her hand. It was cold as river stones. She looked at him, long and hard, and then barely nodded. He turned toward the door, then paused. I ain't fancy, he said, but no one here's gonna hit you. He meant it gently, but the words struck harder than a fist. Etta didn't speak, just stepped past him into the house, into warmth. And for the first time in weeks, the wind stopped howling in her chest. By morning, the town of Willow Bend was humming, not with song nor sermon, but with a sharper kind of music. Gossip spun thin like thread and tugged tight across clotheslines, between storefronts, and in every spoon-stirred teacup on Main Street. Etta Holloway had slept beneath a quilt that smelled of cedar, her ribs aching with each breath, but not from fresh bruises. Just memory, old pain. Her body remembered what her heart was trying to forget. She rose before dawn, drawn by the smell of coffee and the muffled sounds of Rhett moving about the kitchen. She hadn't expected warmth. Not real warmth. But there it was, bacon crisping in the pan, bread toasting near the stove, and him humming low under his breath. He didn't greet her with questions. Just passed her a tin cup, without a word. She took it with both hands. No sermon. No stare. That silence of his was more merciful than any prayer she'd ever heard. I should go, she said quietly, though her fingers stayed curled around the cup. You could, he replied, voice steady, but it's cold out there, and your feet ain't healed. She looked down at the borrowed boots. Her lip trembled, but she drank. When they rode into town again, it was to collect feed and fencing nails. Rhett needed supplies, and Etta had insisted on coming. Chin high, bruises fading but not gone. She wore a bonnet now, borrowed too, pulled low to keep the wind and stares at bay. But bonnets don't hide posture, and shame walks with a certain slump. The wagon creaked to a halt outside Boone's office. Rhett helped her down this time without hesitation. He offered her his arm like it was something ordinary, like it didn't mean anything more than steadiness. Inside, Boone looked up with a sigh that had more weight than wind. Morning, Rhett. Miss Etta. Etta offered a nod. She hadn't yet learned how to meet the marshal's eyes. They're looking for you, Boone said, flat and tired. Eli and Ruth? Rhett asked. Boone nodded. Came through early, demanding a search. I told him I couldn't drag a woman back like a sack of feed, without cause. And they quoted scripture. Etta flinched. Boone looked at her gently. They said you're not right in the head, that you're grieving wrong, that you ran off with family property. I was family, Etta whispered, until my husband died. Then I became a burden. Boone rubbed a hand over his jaw. I'm not the judge of hearts, Miss Etta, but I am the law. And right now I got no papers saying you're bound to them. Rhett stood quiet, arms folded. His stillness spoke louder than anger ever could. Boone sighed again. You stay with Rhett long as you like, but don't go near their land. And watch yourself. Folks here don't take kindly to disruptions. Disruption, Rhett muttered. She's a woman, not a fire. Boone met his gaze. Town doesn't know the difference. They left with the warning hanging behind them like smoke. At the general store, the chatter swelled the moment they stepped in. Della Rowe was arranging spice tins on the front shelf, but her eyes locked on Etta like a hawk to a rabbit. Well, she said, drawing the word out like taffy. Ain't this a morning full of surprises? Just need nails, cornmeal, and barley, Rhett said, brushing past. Etta kept close behind him, but Della wasn't one to let a wound pass unprodded. Thought you left town, Miss Etta. Last we heard, you were grieving proper at your in-law's place. Etta's lips parted, then closed. She didn't owe anyone the story, but shame burned her cheeks anyway. She's with me now, Rhett said without looking up. Della blinked. With you? He met her gaze, calm and unshaken. You heard me. Della's mouth worked around something unsaid, but it never made it past her teeth. Behind the counter, an older woman Etta didn't know leaned in to whisper something. Etta caught only fragments, used goods, poor Rhett, scandal brewing. She wanted to disappear. Her body tensed as if expecting someone to drag her out by the arm. Instead, Rhett said, boot polish too. Black. Della handed over the items without another word, but her silence was thick with unsaid judgment. When they exited, the cold hit Etta like a bomb. At least outside, the cruelty didn't pretend to be sugar. I'm sorry, she murmured as they rode out of town. For what? You shouldn't have to defend me. Rhett looked at her, slow and thoughtful. Don't reckon you understand. I ain't defending you like you're some helpless thing. Then why? He adjusted the reins. Because you didn't deserve what they gave you. And because you looked me in the eye when you were bleeding and didn't ask for pity. Just space to walk forward. Etta swallowed hard. Folks forget, he went on. Everyone bleeds the same in the snow. They rode in silence until the ranch gate creaked open again. A sparrow fluttered near the trough, wings like paper. Etta watched it fly. Jealous, maybe. Later that afternoon, she tried to sweep the porch. Her side ached, but she pushed through it. Rhett didn't stop her. He watched from the corral, where he was hammering new boards into place. You don't have to work, he called eventually. I do, she said, breathless. Else I'll rust. That night, she found an old book on the mantel and opened it while Rhett read by the oil lamp. He didn't ask what it was. She didn't tell him it belonged to his late wife, because she didn't know. But something about the pressed flower inside the pages made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she'd been allowed to borrow another woman's piece for a while. The piece didn't last. At dawn the next day, a rider came. Dust rose behind him, and his horse's flanks were lathered with sweat. He wore a broad-brimmed hat and a scowl that preceded his voice. Eli Holloway. Etta's blood froze. He didn't dismount, just looked at Rhett with eyes that could split wood. Heard you had something that don't belong to you. Rhett didn't answer. Eli spat. She's ours. Got a place back home. Her duties. Her debt. Etta stepped behind Rhett before she even realized she had moved. She ain't yours, Rhett said, voice flat. She was married to my brother. That makes her kin. And kin don't run. She ran, Rhett said. That should tell you something. Eli leaned forward, sneering. You think takin in a broken woman makes you holy? She's nothing but a load of sin wearing a pretty face. Rhett moved forward once. Slow. Controlled. But his hand hovered near his belt. She stays, he said. Or we can see what the law thinks about your kind of hospitality. Eli glared. You'll regret this. Both of you. He turned and rode off without another word, the threat heavy as thunder. As the dust settled, Etta turned to Rhett. He'll come back. I know. They'll ruin you, she whispered. He looked at her then, truly looked. They won't. But you're not a burden, Etta. The words landed hard. He hadn't said them for show. He said them like a man naming a truth carved into stone. She didn't answer. But when she walked back into the house, she didn't slump this time. Outside, the wind stirred the grass, brushing it soft and slow. And for the first time, Etta thought, maybe there's room in this world for women who stopped asking for permission. That evening, the sky turned the color of old bruises, purple, swollen, streaked with a sickly yellow light. The kind of sky that made horses restless and old bones ache. Rhett glanced toward the horizon, lips tight, as the first low rumble shivered through the clouds. Storm's coming, he muttered under his breath, though it wasn't the weather that worried him. Inside the house, Etta moved quietly, still unsure of her place. The borrowed boots sat by the door, scuffed now with work and miles. She was learning the shape of the house by habit, how the floor dipped near the stove, how the latch on the pantry needed a firm twist. Every time she touched something, she expected to be corrected. But Rhett never spoke unless he had to, and never once told her she was doing it wrong. That silence unnerved her at first. Then it began to feel like space, like a kindness stretched out, waiting for her to step into it. The storm rolled in close after dusk. Rain clattered soft at first, then harder. The windows wept. Etta lit a lamp and moved to the hearth, rubbing her arms. The sound of thunder. It crawled inside her like a familiar shadow. She didn't notice she was shaking until the cup slipped from her fingers and shattered. Rhett came in from the barn, water beating off his hat and dripping from the hem of his coat. He looked at the broken pieces, then at her. Her hands were curled at her sides, eyes far away. "Etta," he asked gently. She flinched at her name. His voice brought her back like light under a door. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's just a cup." She looked at him then, and her voice cracked. "It's the thunder. I can't." Her arms crossed over her chest like she could hold herself together. Rhett took off his hat and stepped closer, slow as snowmelt. "You want company tonight?" Her breath hitched. "No. Could you? I'll sit outside your door." She nodded. Later, she lay curled in the bed, blanket pulled up high, the lamp flickering on the nightstand. Outside the bedroom door, she heard the soft thud of him settling in, the wooden chair creaking beneath his weight. The rifle was across his lap. He wasn't guarding against her fear. He was standing between it and her. The thunder passed after midnight. Etta slept in snatches, dreams fragmented by memory. Her late husband's voice, her own silence, hands grabbing, doors slamming, the smell of whiskey and wet hay. At dawn, the storm left behind a muddy hush. Birds started to sing again. The chair outside her door was empty, but the scent of coffee drifted through the house. She found Rhett outside, shirt sleeves rolled, hammering a loose board back into the barn. The sun caught the silver in his hair. "I can help," she said. He paused. "You sure?" She nodded. "I need to do something with my hands." He didn't argue, just handed her a basket. Chickens likely hungry. Feed bins inside. The small task steadied her. Chickens didn't judge. They clucked, pecked, and fluttered, and didn't care who she'd been or what people said. She scattered feed in slow, careful arcs, listening to the rhythm of grain hitting dirt. Rhett watched her from the fence line, not to hover, just to be there. When she turned, her eyes met his, and in that glance, something softened between them. Not quite trust, not yet, but something akin to it, a tentative tether. Later, they sat on the porch, sharing bread and bacon, steam curling from their coffee mugs. "I wasn't always this quiet," she said suddenly. He didn't interrupt. "Before I married, I sang in church. Loud, even. I used to laugh with my whole body. Folks said I had a light in me." He looked at her, waiting. "I haven't sung in 4 years." Rhett stared into the distance. A storm don't steal light, just hides it for a while. She closed her eyes at that. Let the silence sit between them like an old friend. That afternoon, they mended fences together. She held the boards steady while he nailed them into place. Her arms ached, but she didn't stop. He didn't treat her like she was fragile, and somehow that made her feel stronger. He handed her water when the sun rose high. She took it, their fingers brushing. A tiny, startled heat passed between them. The day passed with a rhythm of work, and Etta found herself humming under her breath. Just a note or two. Nothing loud. But Rhett glanced over, surprised, and smiled the barest smile. She smiled back. As the sun dipped, they returned to the house. She cooked this time simple cornbread and stew. He washed his hands without being told, sat down without comment. After supper, she cleared the dishes, and he stoked the fire. "You're different than most men," she said. He chuckled low. "Don't talk much, if that's what you mean." "I mean you don't want anything." He tilted his head. "You sure about that?" She froze. He didn't push. Just added, "I want peace. I want quiet. And I'd like to see you not flinch every time someone moves too quick." She turned away, blinking fast. "Etta," he said softly, "you're not broken." "You don't know that." He shrugged. "Maybe not. But I know what broke looks like. You're still standing. That counts for something." Before she could answer, hoofbeats cracked the quiet. She rushed to the window. A rider. Dust trailing. Fast. Rhett stood, jaw tightening. As the rider neared, the shape came into view. Broad shoulders, familiar hat. Etta's heart stuttered. Eli Holloway. Again. He didn't dismount. Just stopped by the gate and shouted, "That woman's still mine by law." Rhett stepped onto the porch, hands loose at his sides. Eli pointed. "I got the preacher coming. If she wants to live in sin, fine. But everyone's going to know what she is." "Leave," Rhett said. Eli spat. "You think marrying her'll change what she's done? She hasn't done anything. Then why is she hiding behind you?" Rhett moved forward once, slow and solid. "Because the last man she trusted broke her ribs." Eli sneered. "She's a burden. And when men get tired of burdens, they drop 'em." "She's not a burden," Rhett said, his voice like gravel and iron. Eli stared for a long moment, then turned his horse hard, riding off with a cloud of dust and threat trailing behind. Etta stepped outside, her legs trembling. "He'll be back," she said. "I know. I don't want to be the cause of your ruin." "You're not," Rhett said. "He is." She stood beside him, watching the dust settle. The sun dipped low, bleeding gold across the land. "I don't want to live afraid." "Then don't." He didn't reach for her. He didn't have to. That night, she left a folded blanket at his door. Not as an offering, but as a choice. She sat on the porch with the wind in her hair and the scent of rain still clinging to the earth. She wasn't healed, but she was here. And tomorrow she'd still be here. The storm was gone, but something stronger had taken its place. The next morning, Etta woke to the sound of hooves on hard dirt and the creak of wagon wheels pulling up too close. She sat up in the bed, heart pounding, already knowing before she pulled back the curtain. Eli Holloway had returned, and this time he didn't come alone. Ruth Holloway sat beside him in the wagon, her posture stiff, her hands folded over a black leather Bible, as if it gave her claim. 2 other men rode behind them, strangers in dusty hats, the kind that didn't speak unless paid to. Etta didn't wait for Rhett to fetch her. She stepped out onto the porch on her own, spine straight, arms folded tight across her chest. Her heart beat like a trapped bird, but her chin didn't lower. Rhett stood in the yard, still and watchful. Eli dismounted with theatrical care. "Well," he said, loud enough for the trees to hear. "Look what the rancher dragged in." Ruth's voice followed, sharp as she descended from the wagon. "We come in peace, though I don't see much peace in sin." Etta felt Rhett move to her side, not in front of her, just beside. That single gesture mattered. "I told you she stays," he said calmly. "And I told you," Eli said, pulling a folded set of papers from his coat pocket, "that she's property under our care. Her husband left no will. She owns nothing. And she's mentally unfit to live alone. Ain't that right, Ruth?" Ruth nodded with a face like stone. "Wanders at night. Weeps for no reason. Can't keep house without breaking things." Rhett said nothing, just held out a hand for the papers. Eli hesitated, then handed them over. Rhett read them slowly, jaw working. "They ain't legal," he said at last. "Not unless she signs them." Eli's mouth twisted. "She's under our protection. Don't need her signature to keep her safe." Etta stepped forward then, her voice trembling but audible. You never kept me safe. You kept me quiet. There's a difference. Ruth's lips thinned. You lived under our roof. You ate our food. I scrubbed your floors. You locked me in the cellar when I cried too loud. You prayed over me like I was a curse. Eli took a step forward, eyes narrowing. You think this rancher's gonna save you? You think folks won't talk? They're already talking, Etta said. And I'm still standing. The tension twisted like wire between them. Rhett broke it. His voice was steady, but his hand clenched the paper so hard it crumpled. There's a way to end this, he said. Right now. Etta looked up at him. Marry me. The words weren't loud. He didn't announce them. He just said them the way you say something true. Etta blinked. What? You want to stay free. You need protection they can't challenge. Marriage papers speak louder than rumors, and louder than false claims. She stared at him. You do that. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering respect. My name on paper. Your peace on land. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even hope. It was shelter, quiet, sturdy legal. Etta turned toward Ruth and Eli. If I marry him, you lose your hold. Ruth's mouth opened, then shut. Eli growled, you wouldn't dare. I would, Etta said. I already did when I walked away. An hour later, they were in town. Boone Carter looked from Rhett to Etta with tired eyes, then to the papers they laid down on his desk. You sure? We're sure, Rhett said. Etta added, it's my will. The marriage license was inked in silence. Boone scribbled his signature with a long sigh, then looked up. You want a witness? Rhett shook his head. Don't need ceremony. Just paper. They stood before Boone in the back room of the jailhouse, where marriages and law met in creaky chairs and half-lit lamps. Rhett's voice was steady when he said, I take her to wife, lawful and full. Etta's hand didn't shake this time. I take him to husband. No kiss followed. No ring. Just two people choosing each other in the still wreckage of their pasts. Outside, Delarue watched them step out from the sheriff's office, lips pinched like a twisted ribbon. She didn't speak, but word would gallop ahead of them before nightfall. They rode back to the ranch beneath a sky washed clean by last night's rain. Neither spoke much. Inside the house, Etta removed her shawl, set it on the hook, and turned to him. Thank you. He met her eyes. I'll sleep in the barn if you want. She shook her head. You don't have to. This house has room for breathing. That's all I need. He nodded. That night, she sat on the porch long after the sun had set, knees tucked to her chest, stars pressing close like curious eyes. She was a married woman again, but it felt nothing like before. This marriage didn't shackle. It steadied. Inside, Rhett placed an extra blanket by her door. Not because she asked, because he'd noticed she slept cold. She whispered into the night, I don't know how to be safe. From inside, his voice came back, low and sure. You don't have to know. Just rest a while. The knowing comes later. She closed her eyes and let the night wrap around her. Tomorrow, people would talk. More than ever. But tonight, the wind in the trees sounded almost like music. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the sound. The snow came heavy that night, cloaking the ranch in quiet. By morning, the world outside had turned to white velvet, hiding hoofprints and sins alike. Smoke rose from the chimney in thin silver coils, the only sign of life on the edge of the plains. Inside, the stove ticked softly, and Rhett poured coffee into 2 cups without asking which one Etta wanted. He just knew now. She took it with fingers that no longer trembled. They'd been married for 5 days. Not once had Rhett touched her without invitation. Not once had she asked for space he hadn't already made. They spoke little, but their silences had grown rich, filled with shared rhythm, chopping wood, feeding stock, mending what needed mending. It was a good morning until the dog started barking. Rhett stood before she did, already moving toward the rifle by the door. Etta followed, heart beating hard and fast, mouth gone dry. She peered through the frost-rimmed window and saw the figures breaking through the white, Eli, Ruth, and the 2 hired riders again, bundled in coats, breath steaming in the cold. They were armed. They'd come to take her back. Stay inside, Rhett said without raising his voice. She shook her head. No. He looked at her, eyebrows drawn. They won't hesitate. And neither will I. She reached into the drawer and pulled out the small pistol Rhett had set aside days ago. Oil slick and ready. Her grip wasn't perfect, but her aim would be sure enough. Outside, Eli reined in hard. You got one last chance, Colton. Ruth dismounted with all the grace of judgment. That paper marriage is a joke. She's unwell. You married a broken woman. She's not yours, Rhett called back. Not your business. Not your burden. Eli unslung his rifle. She's ours by blood. Etta stepped outside before Rhett could stop her. Snow hissed beneath her boots. I bled, she said clearly. That makes me mine. The wind caught her shawl, tossing it like a banner. Eli's eyes darkened. You think you're something now? Because you live in a man's house and hide behind his name. I don't hide. I left. You kept me like livestock, prayed the bruises away, told me silence was godly. Her voice shook, but she held steady. I won't go back. Ruth's mouth curled. Then you'll freeze here, alone, once he tires of you. Rhett moved beside her, rifle down, but ready. I won't tire. Eli raised his gun, then die with her. Everything cracked at once. A shout, a click of hammers, then gunfire, loud, sharp, and final. Rhett shoved Etta aside and took the first bullet through the shoulder. He stayed upright. She screamed his name, but he didn't fall. Eli moved forward, raising the barrel again. Etta raised hers. She didn't aim for the chest. She aimed near Ruth's feet, kicked up snow. The shot rang out, precise and warning. Next one, she said coldly, won't miss. It was Ruth who broke first, stumbling back, eyes wide. The riders hesitated, then looked at each other. One lowered his gun. The other turned his horse. You're outnumbered, Etta said, voice cold as the air. And you're wrong. Eli blinked. Wrong about me. Wrong about him. Wrong about what a woman owes after suffering. Boone's voice cut through the snow like a knife. Drop the rifle, Eli. The marshal rode in from the ridge, rifle raised, 2 deputies behind him. He must have been watching, waiting. Eli hesitated, but Boone's aim didn't shake. The rifle hit the snow. Within moments, the Holloways were disarmed and Ruth was shrieking about law, about vengeance, about ruin. Boone said nothing, just bound their hands and told his men. Charges of cruelty, detainment without cause, threats of violence. I'll see to the rest in town. Eli was hauled away, his boots dragging 2 long furrows in the snow. Rhett leaned against the porch rail, breath labored, hand to his shoulder. The blood was dark, soaking through cloth and turning steam in the cold. Etta ran to him. You're bleeding bad. Just a graze, he said, though his knees buckled slightly. Lie. He grinned through clenched teeth. Was a good line, though. She helped him inside, steadied him down into a chair, ripped strips of cloth to pack the wound. You should have let me handle alone, he muttered. No, she said, tying the bandage tight. I needed to stand in front of them. His breath caught when she pressed the cloth. Why? Because they broke something I have to rebuild myself. You can't do that for me. He studied her face. I didn't marry you for saving, she said, voice low. I married you for shelter. But somewhere between firewood and fence mending, I found something else. What's that? My voice. He reached for her hand then. The first time he'd done so without asking, without ceremony. Just reached, calloused fingers warm against hers. You think you could ever grow into this? He asked softly. Not just paper. Not just name. She looked at him, cheeks damp now, but not from fear. I already have. Outside, the snow melted just a little beneath the warming sun. Later, as the world quieted and the lawmen rode off with the last of the Holloways, Etta stood barefoot on the porch, the cold no longer biting. The ranch stretched wide before her, peaceful and slow. Rhett came out beside her, sling on his arm, steam rising from 2 mugs in his good hand. He passed her one. She drank in silence, then asked, Think the town will forgive us? Maybe. Maybe not. She nodded. Doesn't matter. No, he said, it doesn't. She rested her head against his uninjured shoulder, and together they watched the wind stir the pines. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was a vow, a home, And in the still hush of that winter morning, something sacred was stitched, not with threads or rings, but with every scar they didn't hide, and every word they never needed to speak aloud. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in a thunderclap. Sometimes it walks through snow, bruised and tired, then stays. Because it knows the storm is over. Because it chooses to remain. And if you're lucky, if you're real still, you'll hear it in the wind whispering. Not all broken things stay broken. Not all beginnings start with a kiss. Some begin with shelter and end in strength.